A new contract for an academy player, pre-season friendlies, and a goalkeeper on the move. Welcome back to the Latics Lowdown with me, Corey Bissell, as always, but for the first time at Wednesday, 7 p.m. We made it. We did it. We eventually got there. This isn't pre-recorded. Do not scratch your eyes. This isn't pre-recorded. It's not a Thursday. It's Wednesday, 7 p.m, and we have done it. This will be the schedule from now on. I vow this moment on. It's Wednesdays, it's 7 p.m. every week, the Latics Lowdown, taking us through whatever's gone on in the week, really. And if we have a bit of a drab week where Latics decide not to do much, two things. One, I'll see what I can do. I'll conjure up some sensible transfers. Let's be honest, that's usually what I do. Or, knowing Latics, we'll have a barren week, and then we'll sign 7 strikers the week after. But today's been a bit of a busy one. This last week, since we last spoke, we've had quite a bit go on. There was nothing that went on until the last 24 hours. And then they decided that the Latics gods decided they would bless me with some content. So thank you out there to whoever's decided that everything at Wigan needs to go on from Tuesday, 6 p.m. onwards, really. But should we get into it? Should we just start? We've got pre-season friendlies that have been announced, and it's certainly friendlies. It's what we're used to, really, isn't it? We've got Chorley away on Saturday the 5th, Accrington away on Saturday the 19th, and Tranmere away on Saturday the 26th. It's the usual friendlies sort of circulating that we're used to here. Northwestern teams from divisions below. We've already been blessed with getting pre-season abroad this year, so you've got to expect them to bring us back down to earth somehow. And by having Chorley, Accrington and Tranmere, no disrespect to those clubs, but obviously we've had pre-seasons in the past where we've played Man United and Liverpool in the same pre-season, and this isn't that. Let's just say that there's not much to add, really, if I'm honest, as regards this. Minutes in legs, hopefully get some new signings on the pitch, integrate the Ryan Lowe system in a more competitive sort of format than training, obviously. And that's about it. That's all pre-season's really about. I would have liked to have seen us try and take on at least one team from League One or from even above. I know we spoke about this last week. League One next year is very, very northwestern or sort of north-based. We could have surely made a trip to Bradford, or we could have, Blackpool. There could be someone around our position in League One that we could have taken on, but not to be this year. League Two and below is what we're looking at, as well as going away to Spain. So it is what it is. It's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure on Twitter it's drummed up the usual thing that it does every year, where people complain about playing the same teams every year. And to be fair, you're within your rights to say that. We kind of do, but it's only pre-season. It's not the end of the world. But I thought I'd bring it into today's show because we've announced it just off the back of announcing that we are in fact going to Benidorm. After I joked about that last week, we are actually going about 100 miles away from Benidorm, which it's quite far, but for Spain isn't that far. So let's hope that none of the lads fancy a 100-mile trip down the road during pre-season. But I thought I'd bring that into today's show just before the news today, because again, Latics love to drop it on me last minute, that Harry McHugh has signed a new one-year deal with an option of a further year. I've seen some interesting takes on this on Twitter already. Again, Twitter isn't really it's not really a good gauge for the actual feelings of the fan base, but I've seen people on Twitter complaining, saying it's like an example of why we're not moving in the right direction, that we're giving a 23-year-old out of the academy a new contract when he's not really proven much. But my response to that would be, well, if he's not proven much to convince you for him to stay, he's also probably not done much or been given the opportunity to do much for you to be convinced that he should go either. And I think my take on this is that you compare it to Scott Smith, and I think Ryan Lowe will be within his own right. You don't get to the Championship and have as good a career as he has done, promotions on his CV, by not having an idea of what a good player looks like. And He spoke towards the back end of last season about work and grit not being enough anymore and that we needed quality on the ball. And I think the decision to let go of Scott Smith but retain Harry McHugh speaks to that. I think throughout the academy, Harry McHugh's shown that he's a great driver of the ball. He can pick out a pass into the final third with ease, and he does have quality. One thing is also for certain now with Ryan Lowe is that Harry McHugh is a central midfielder, and that will be nailed on, and it will either be that he works or he doesn't. But he's a central midfielder, and he won't be moved about too much. I can't imagine him being played at wing back. There's no way he gets played at centre back or even up front. So he's a central midfielder now. We saw Sean Maloney trying him at inverted fullback. We've seen Sean Maloney trying him in the base midfield and attacking midfield. And he was just sort of moved around to sort of fill gaps and plug holes in teams when we had injury crises. Now he's a midfielder. He's going to be on that left-hand side of central midfield as a left-footed player, like John Mellish did towards the back end of the season, like he did himself within his own right when Ryan Lowe first came in. And I said this a few weeks ago when Harry McHugh was offered his contract, that there were times towards the back end of last season where Ronan Darcy was available and Harry McHugh was selected over him. So this idea of Harry McHugh not being good enough, and I reckon a lot of it comes from he's probably low rated on FIFA, and people have made their mind up that at 23 he's not got room to grow. But realistically, if he manages to pick up 20 odd games this season, you never know. He could prove that he is as good as, if not better, as a Ronan Darcy. Just because he hasn't been given the platform yet doesn't mean the ability isn't there. So I'm happy with this. I think it speaks that it's a 1-year deal with an option of a further year. I think Ryan Lowe will have looked when he came in at the squad, obviously, and he will have probably looked directly at McHugh and Scott Smith and thought, right, okay, you're both coming towards the end of your contracts. Do I want to keep either of you? Do I want to let both of you go? Do I want to let one of you go and keep one of you? And he will have made that decision on McHugh that potentially, with it only being a 1-year deal with a further year, he'll have probably made a decision that I'm not quite sold on you. You've got a lot to prove in first team football, of course. He's not had many minutes. But you've shown me enough to keep you around for a sort of 12-month period, a bit of an extra audition, if you will, for Harry McHugh this next year. And then obviously we've got that option of a year on top of that. If Harry McHugh does manage to catch fire, you don't want him leaving on a free, ideally, do you? So I think it's really clever business from the club. Ryan Lowe obviously likes the look of him, wants to give him an extra sort of lifeline to sort of revitalise his wing career, really get it kicking on at 23. And we've got the option of an extra year so that if it does really succeed, he can't just leave immediately onto somewhere else, which I'm not convinced that he would anyway, but it's always nice to have that set in stone within somebody's contract that they can't just dip after a year. I'd be like, yeah, cheers, lads. You've given me first team football now. I'm off to the championship kind of thing. So it's good business for me. It's smart business, and you've just got to trust Ryan Lowe's judgment. If you're one of those people that aren't convinced on Harry McHugh, if you're one of the people that aren't sold on Harry McHugh as a player, you've just got to go with Ryan Lowe's judgment and hope that it pays off. And at the end of the day, he's not going to be on a massive wage. So it's not going to really cost us. If over pre-season Ryan Lowe decides that McHugh isn't exactly what he wants, he'll probably look to sign somebody else as well, and it won't affect the budget too much. So I wouldn't worry about Harry McHugh. I think he's just been given an extra period of time to demonstrate what he can do, and that's it. I wouldn't read too much into that beyond what it is really. We've had some more recruitments as well over the last week that some people may have seen, more staff recruitments, behind the scenes recruitments. So people may not have had chance to have a look at this, but we have brought in Joe Riley. I believe it's done. Alan Nixon was reporting that we were taking Fleetwood's head of recruitment and having him as our head of recruitment, which, if you ask me, based on the last summer transfer window, I'm sure we would all agree the recruitment needed improving. In the defence of the previous recruitment team or anyone that's left the club that was in that recruitment team, the January transfer window was a lot better. I think we recognised our mistakes. We brought in players like John Mellish, more experienced heads. We tried for Brendan Wiradu, which I will touch on in a moment. But the summer window set us up for failure, really, didn't it? We brought in too many young players that hadn't proved anything, and we didn't give them experienced pros around them to sort of lead them along the way. And I think that speaks in the fact that we had some great performances, Bolton away, Bristol away, but then we also had some absolutely foul performances. I think a Blackpool away was one of them. And towards the back end of the season, when we had not a lot to fight for, some of those performances in the latter stages of Maloney's tenure really started to creep in as a regular thing. So, yeah, new head of recruitment, Joe Riley from Fleetwood, ex-Bolton defender, but I won't let that tarnish him. He is coming as a head of recruitment. We've also got Tony Warner. Now, this one is also interesting. I know a lot of people may look into staff recruitments and not necessarily bother as much. They're not playing staff at the end of the day. They're not on the pitch doing the business for us. So there's a lot of people that won't look beyond that. But these two, for me, as I will touch on in this show, are big recruitment for different reasons. So Tony Warner, I will touch on a bit later on. But Joe Riley, if we go through, obviously I mentioned his previous roles at Fleetwood Town. Now, some of the players that Tony Warner, not Tony Warner, that's the goalkeeper coach. Some of the players that Joe Riley brought into Fleetwood Town. Now, this is courtesy of Latics Vision on Twitter. So thank you, good sir, for this. Brendan Wirradu, a player that last January, no secret about it, we fought tooth and nail to bring to the club. Undoubtedly, I'm unsure of Wirradu's contract situation, but if he's under a decent contract, they will make a profit on Brendan Wirradu. Bosun Luau, now, we know a lot about that lad because he is the central midfielder that's about 6'5" that tore us apart when we went to Fleetwood away last year. So if you didn't know Bosun Luau, I'm sure I've jogged your memory, unfortunately. Jack Marriott, a decent signing, same with Jaden Stockley. Malise Asamoah, of course, we are very familiar with now. Broke into our team towards the back end of last season. Went on loan in Ireland, so that's a great sort of name to put on Joe Riley's CV. As someone that he brought into Fleetwood and flipped for a profit. Matty Virtue, a very good central midfielder that I believe is still at Fleetwood at the moment, but is rumoured with League One moves, with higher League Two moves. So again, a player that they will likely flip for a profit. And Phoenix Patterson. This is a player I have waxed lyrical about for 3 years, 2.5 years, something silly like that. The fact that Phoenix Patterson is still in a Fleetwood Town shirt makes my mind reel to this day. I don't understand it. Surely this summer he goes, but Phoenix Patterson is a brilliant left winger, brilliant left wing back. So put two and two together. I won't reveal too much of my sensible transfers list that will be out later in the summer, but an excellent left wing back. You know, I'll let you put two and two together there. But a very, very strong list of names that Joe Riley has brought into Fleetwood Town. Now, obviously, you would imagine, you would hope that our facilities and our budgets are higher than Fleetwood. So it's a different job. But you would imagine that these players that he's been able to bring in on cheap deals from Ireland and from lower divisions and all over the place, really, you would imagine that it stands him in good stead to potentially do some cheap deals for us, which isn't a problem. I think a lot of people have this perception in League One that you have to spend a lot of money because of what Birmingham and Wrexham did, and you don't have to do that. You can bring players in on frees and be smart and savvy and bring players in on cheaper deals, like Joe Riley has shown at Fleetwood. I know Fleetwood eventually got relegated, but undoubtedly those are players that are League One standard at a minimum. And you can do that with a restrained budget if you have to. Obviously, you would like to think that we don't have a restrained budget, which would only give Joe Riley more to work with, which is only a positive thing, of course. Like, you give a head of recruitment who has a history of working with a tighter budget successfully, and you give him a higher budget, you would like to think he'll be able to do a similar thing. So that's just a little rundown on Joe Riley. It'll be one to, again, I'm unsure if he's actually officially been, I'd imagine it would be announced, in which case perhaps he isn't here yet, but I'd imagine he's pretty much through the door. The same goes for Tony Warner, who's a goalkeeper coach from Reading. I'd imagine he's pretty much through the door. In which case, welcome. If you're already here. If you're not, you're watching this for a reason. You know you're on your way. So that's a little rundown on Joe Riley for you. Another sort of couple of things that have happened since we last spoke, just to round up the news section of today's show, is unfortunately Ryan Ledson has gone to Huddersfield, which is a little bit heartbreaking. We spoke about Ledson on the first episode, where it was being rumoured that we could be going in for him. Obviously, they're linked to Ryan Lowe as an ex-Preston player, an ex-Preston manager. There was the link there. It never really seemed to come concrete that we actually put an offer in for Ledson. But he's decided to go to Huddersfield anyway, which I think is a brilliant signing for Huddersfield. They've made some really good early moves. I know they've brought in the winger from Ipswich, Marcus Harness, on a free transfer as well, which is a bit worrying because he did all right at Derby in the Championship last year. So Huddersfield making some early moves in this window. You've got to say fair play to them on the Ledson deal. It's a player I'd have liked to have seen at Wigan. Central midfielder, really hard hitting, but it wasn't to be. He's gone to Huddersfield, and obviously that now kills that transfer rumour dead from a couple of weeks ago. Another one that has also been killed dead for us, unfortunately, is Paul Valentin, a player that we spoke about last week, a wing-back from Sheffield Wednesday with really, really good attacking numbers last year in the Championship. It seems that a Championship team did look into those underlying numbers that we spoke about and has decided to pick him up. Preston North End, Ryan Lowe's old team, beating us to it. Again, it was never necessarily 100% clear that we'd actually put an offer in for Paul Valentin, but it was being touted about. It was a player that we spoke about. So I just thought I'd give us an update that is unfortunately gone. The deal can't happen. He's in a Preston shirt. So I'm really gutted about that one as well, because we looked into his underlying numbers. If you haven't watched last week's episode, you can go back and watch it. His underlying numbers for an attacking wing-back in the Championship were outstanding, to be honest. And I thought if there was a world where we could somehow manage to get him in League One, there's a real potential there for him to have ripped up the league. But he's remained in the Championship. He's gone to Preston. And that is another deal, unfortunately, that I was going to say has to be put on pause, but he's gone. It's off the table, unfortunately. So, third bit of news. I'm going to call it rumours. From here on out, we're going with rumours. That's all the news from the last couple of weeks. Joe Riley, Tony Warner coming into the club. Valentin choosing to go to Preston. Ledson choosing to go to Huddersfield. Harry McHugh's new contract and the friendlies. Now we're going into the rumours that have been going on since we last spoke. I've not necessarily made a graphic for this one as I normally do, because it seems very strenuous at best. But I've seen rumours linking us to Liam Thompson at Derby County. Central midfielder seems to be, based off what you hear from Derby fans in the Championship, their version of Scott Smith in terms of like a midfielder that's come through the academy, that plays every game at 110%, but has quality on the ball, importantly. I think that would be the difference that I would put out there potentially between him and Scott Smith, is that apparently he has quality on the ball. They've offered him a contract, Derby, allegedly. I know there's a few League One clubs that have been sniffing around, and reportedly we are one of them. There was a tweet went out during the week that apparently he was doing a medical at Wigan. That's not necessarily true. I don't know where that came from, but that's not the case. Obviously, if Derby have offered him a contract, there's other League One competition. It's a difficult one to get through, but you would hold out hope, of course, as we always do. But one thing that I will say that is nice to see is that we are batting around these sort of players that are being rumoured to other League One teams towards the top end that you would imagine that would be there this time next year in sort of promotion and playoff chases. And players that are under contract, well, have been offered contracts by Championship teams. Paul Valentin, of course, went to a Championship team. Liam Thompson could well stay at Derby. So it's nice to see that we are batting in that sort of area, and that we are showing a bit of ambition, at least with our targets early doors. Of course, it remains to be seen, and we would like to imagine that some of these targets will turn into actual signings for us. But we will see. Liam Thompson, just thought I'd bring you that. I will, of course, in the future, over the coming weeks, if anything comes up, I will keep you updated on Liam Thompson as best I can. Sam Tickle. Now, this is the name of today's podcast, Keeper Conundrum. Tickle's been linked to Norwich, which, 'I mean, they've put an offer in, and it looks as though if they haven't already announced it, they are going to sign Plymouth Argyle goalkeeper Daniel Grimshaw. They are apparently looking in at bringing multiple goalkeepers in, but I'm unsure as to whether they'll get Tickle. It's been reported that they haven't bid for Tickle, which some people said they have, some people said they haven't. They haven't bid for Tickle, but Tickle is a player that they are definitely sort of is on their radar for a number one goalkeeper. I think Daniel Grimshaw will go into the club as the number two, especially if they bring in someone of Sam Tickle's quality. So Tickle is on their radar. They haven't bid for him, but it stirs up that usual conversation that we have around these times a year when the transfer window starts to kick in as to who could we lose, who could we bring in, and in this case, who could we lose. Now, I spoke about this last week when Tom Watson's contract was announced regarding Sam, that in my opinion, as much as he is by far and away the best goalkeeper in this division, I will not even hear any other mention of any other goalkeeper. He's the best goalkeeper in the division. I am of the belief as well that as a League One club who were even looking for promotion, I mean, even Birmingham last season, if they'd have had a goalkeeper that was worth upwards of 5 million, you'd be in a bit silly. As a club who don't have Birmingham's budget, having a goalkeeper that's worth upwards of 5 million is really, really quite daft to not cash in on. And I love him to bits, and I hate that I have to say that. And I would love for us to have a 5 million plus player in every position and win the league and then go and get promoted from the championship, and we never have to have this conversation. But that's not the case. That's not the world that we live in. And the world that we do live in is that if you can get upwards of 5 million for Sam Tickle, that is a hefty amount of money that you can then reinvest into your outfield players. And when we have shifted from a 4-3-3 system to a 5, I suppose it depends how you look at it, 5-1-4-2, we'll go with. It's a big change, and it's a change that requires a lot of flip over in players. Especially when, like, I don't think we have a single wing back at the club, maybe bar Dion Rankine. So, and we don't have a single striker at the club, bar Chris Z. So a lot of change is going to have to happen, and a lot of money is going to have to be spent. And so if you can get that money for Sam Tickle, I heard at one point it was 8 million rising to 12 off of Norwich. Again, they haven't bid for him, so that isn't true. But if we get that sort of money for Sam Tickle, you'd be hard-faced to turn it down, to be honest, with the flip over again, like I said, with the squad that we're going to have to do this summer. So, with that being said, I compiled a list. What do I normally do when players leave or when there's a transfer window? Anyone that follows me on Twitter will know. I make a list of sensible transfers. That's what I do. That's my immediate response to getting over losing something. So, number one, Tom Watson. Why not? He's already part of the team. He's been part of the academy. Just signed his new contract. EFL Cup starts last season. His penalty saving, if anyone watched those games, outrageous. He has an unreal record on penalties. He could just follow in the footsteps of Sam Tickle. We could bring in a number two, a more experienced number two, and we could just push Tom Watson into the limelight and hope that he flies and doesn't fall. However, that, of course, comes with risk. The risk being that if Tom Watson gets thrusted into the first team and doesn't necessarily perform to the level, you've got a problem in that, say you bring in a Jamie Jones type goalkeeper as your number two. Very capable pair of hands, not necessarily a goalkeeper you would want in a promotion race. So Tom Watson leaves us with risk. If you want my personal opinion, I would say, and I will get into this as we go through this list of goalkeepers that I would bring in, I would bring in a number one goalkeeper on loan and give Tom Watson an extra year to sort of brew in the background. Give him minutes in all the cups. I'd give him every single minute of every cup, including the early rounds of the FA Cup. I'd give him all the minutes in the cups because the only way you develop is by playing. So I'd move him from only starting the FL and Bristol Street Motors games to playing every cup game. But I would bring in a number one on loan for a year to give him an extra year to just not necessarily be under the pressure as well of, oh, out the academy, you've got to step into Sam Tickle's gloves. It's a big pressure to come under. And it will be for the goalkeeper that comes in. But to be the academy player that then has to step up to the plate, it's a real risk for me. So I'd bring somebody in on loan. But you can't take it away from Tom Watson. Whenever he has played, he has looked very capable. And so it is a very good, it's a realistic option to bring him in. Again, budget-wise, if you were to bring in a number two, it would likely be on a free transfer. You'd want them to be over the age of at least 29, 30. And so, budget-wise, it may make sense to make Tom Watson the number one, but that isn't what we're here for at the end of the day. We're here to try and get out of this division next season under Ryan Lowe. And when you're looking at that, maybe the most sensible thing is to bring in a number one goalkeeper. And that leads me on to my second choice, and that is Joel Pereira. Now, Tony Warner. Do you remember that name? You better do. I only told you 10 minutes ago. Tony Warner is the goalkeeper coach of Reading last year, who has been brought in to now be our goalkeeper coach. So there is a link there to Pereira, who's just left Reading on a free transfer. He's an experienced goalkeeper at this level. He's been in Man United's academy. He's a really capable shot stopper. Free agent is the key thing for me here. And 28, solid pro. He's done a lot of his career. He's not in the same age bracket as Tom Watson. I think that's fair to say. Sorry, Joel. Don't be offended. But a good age for a goalkeeper. He'd still have years left, which would throw up the question for me that are you then blocking the road path for Tom Watson? In which case, maybe Pereira's not your first choice. But undoubtedly a good goalkeeper at this level. Performed to a very good level for Reading this year. There's the link to Tony Warner, like I said. So he'll be known by the staff. I'm sure he's probably already on a list for if Tickle goes. And so for me, Joel Pereira will be a very good option to come in as a number one for a couple of years. Let Tom Watson brew in the background and just be an overall solid goalkeeper. I think one thing that I will say is that talking about signing goalkeepers isn't the most exciting thing in the world. Of course, like outfield positions are the ones that sell the shirts and they're the ones that score the goals, really. So goalkeepers aren't the most riveting thing, which is why I'm not going to spend a ridiculous amount of time bringing up spreadsheets of statistics for them. They keep clean sheets. They're either a good pair of hands or they're not. And Joel Pereira is. And he'll be known to the staff. The link is there. It's a free transfer. It's one that could be made easily. And that is why he's on my list of 5 goalkeepers to replace Sam Tickle. Second up, this is the dream transfer. I think this is probably the only goalkeeper, having just said what I've just said, this is probably the only goalkeeper that would get people excited. And that is Owen Goodman on loan from Crystal Palace, it would be. If you don't know Owen Goodman, we are just done with the season. Where have you been? Because this lad has been outstanding in League Two for AFC Wimbledon last season. 21 clean sheets is outrageous. League Two playoff winner, of course. I've put down there as an extremely popular goalkeeper throughout the EFL. Again, he's probably pound for pound been the best goalkeeper in the EFL. Of course, I'm sure if you dropped him into the Championship, he doesn't perform as well. That's not what I'm saying. But pound for pound, sort of division by division, his level has been so much higher than League Two standard that I worry that he could do the double jump where he goes back to Palace and they loan him out to the Championship. I would not be surprised at all. It's been reported that Bolton have been looking at him, but I know Bolton have recently had an offer accepted, I believe, on loan for a Chelsea goalkeeper. So maybe that opens the path for Goodman for us. But I'm sure every League One team would want Owen Goodman back. I'm sure Wimbledon will fight ridiculously hard to keep him for this League One campaign. Any top team would want this lad in goal. 6'3", he's built. He's a commanding presence. He's a great shot stopper. He's decent with his feet. Owen Goodman would be my number one on loan let Tom Watson again, like I keep saying, simmer in the background and develop while Goodman sort of takes that on his shoulders. We spoke about Sam Tickle and that sort of idea of needing to fill his gloves. I'm sure Owen Goodman, off the back of his previous season at Wimbledon, would be more than confident enough to take that on and to run with it. Next up, Finlay Herrick. Now, I'm going early with this one. I'm going early. This lad's going to be a great goalkeeper in the AFL next season. I'm going early with it. He was nominated for the Premier League 2 Player of the Year, which for a goalkeeper is really good. Unheard. Well, maybe not unheard of. I've not read into previous year's nominations. I'm not going to make myself look silly there, but it's rare for a goalkeeper to be nominated for Player of the Season. He's obviously out the West Ham Academy. Be a big move to move up north for a year, but we've done it with plenty of players recently coming out of London to join us. So Finlay Herrick, not a lot really to say about him other than capable pair of hands, very good with his feet, as you can imagine goalkeepers nowadays coming out of Premier League academies are. He's quite a big lad, so any concerns about him being 19 and getting swamped by pressure, I wouldn't worry about that too much. He's quite a big lad. Not quite similar build to Sam Tickle, but not far off, to be honest. And yeah, Finlay Herrick's just a great goalkeeper out of a Premier League 2 academy, nominated for Player of the Year. What more can you say, really? He will be a success wherever he goes next year. I don't see him being loaned out to League 2, which opens the door for him to be loaned out to at least League 1, potentially the Championship. For his first loan, I don't see it being the Championship, which leaves League 1. And you'd imagine the top clubs would be or at least the clubs that are perceived to potentially be in and around the top 6 next year. They'll be the ones that will be looking at this lad, of course, like I keep saying, nominated for Premier League 2 Player of the Season. So the chances for me of him ending up at a team that you would expect to be in the bottom half of the table are lesser so than maybe a Barnsley, a Bradford, a Bolton, a Wigan, a Huddersfield even. So Finlay Herrick is one to look out for. If he doesn't end up at Wigan, I'm still keeping an eye on him because, like I said, I'm betting on this lad. I think he's going to be a really, really good goalkeeper wherever he goes next season. And that is why he's made my top 5 replacements for Sam Tickle. And finally, Joe Whitworth. Okay. Don't read the bottom bit first and shake your head. Joe Whitworth is an excellent shot stopper. 15 clean sheets this year at Gary Caldwell's. Is he still there? I believe he is. Gary Caldwell's Exeter City, which is a really, really good record for Exeter, to be honest. I didn't realise until formulating this list that they'd made so many clean sheets and that they've been so good defensively. So fair play for that. Played 2 games in the Premier League for Palace, if you remember those, when they had crazy goalkeeper injury crises. Only 5'10". Let's cover that. Joe Whitworth being only 5'10" is why, for me, he is probably 5th on this list of potential incomings. However, he makes the list because he is outrageous with his feet. He's a really good shot stopper. You can't deny him of that. And he's agile enough to get up and around any area of the goal. Don't worry about shots and things like that. Corners, he claims relatively with ease, to be honest, for someone of a short stature for a goalkeeper. However, he does sit 5th for me on the basis of if you're a top team in a division, especially League 1, League 2, the last thing you need to be in and around the top 6 is to have something that stands out that is a weakness or that could be taken advantage of by another team. And having a 5'10" goalkeeper, it is one of those, I've got to say, because the last thing you need is to be 7th on the last day of the season in the hunt for the playoffs, and suddenly some 6'4" centre back just rolls over Whitworth, and we concede a corner, and the ref doesn't give it as a foul, and suddenly you're like, oh, well, maybe he's been great all season, but in that exact moment, him being 5'10" has cost us the playoffs. And you just don't really need it. From a narrative point of view as well, he hasn't had it much at Exeter because he's been brilliant and because Exeter, respectfully, aren't necessarily challenging for anything in the division this year. But if you put him on games on Sky for a big club in a title deciding game or in a playoff deciding game, it's something that's going to get pushed. The narrative of Joe Whitworth being a short goalkeeper will be pushed, unfortunately. I think no matter where he goes, when he gradually makes his way up the football pyramid and he appears in sort of more mainstream games, he is going to have this narrative push that he's a short goalkeeper. But he is a brilliant goalkeeper, and that is why he has made my top 5 for replacements for Sam Tickle. But that brings us to the end of that little segment, and that is relatively it for this week. There's one more thing that I want to touch on before I leave you here, and that is Tello Asgard. Now, that is a name we've not heard in a minute, but Tello Asgard is potentially on the move again. And you might think, Corey, I don't care. He's not our player anymore. We should care, and I'll tell you for why. When Tello Asgard left for Luton on £3.5 million deal and his release clause was met, there was something in the contract that says, and I'm unsure of what the exact percentage is, but when he leaves Luton, for whatever money it is, we will receive a percentage of that. Now, Luton, obviously, were relegated. And the Norway manager has come out and said that Tello Asgard can't make the World Cup squad if he's to play in League One. It's too low a level. Championship at his stage in his development, I can understand, but League One is too low. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? Tello Asgard is a year away from the World Cup. By the end of next season, we'll have the World Cup. So he has to move now if he wants to play in the World Cup, is what the Norway manager has essentially told him. Which means 6 months after bagging £3.5 million for Tello Asgard, we could be in for a little bit of a windfall. He is going to move, I believe. I don't think he stays in League One. There's no benefit to him. He'll want to play in that World Cup. He's been part of the Norway under-21s. He's been part of the Norway first team squad since he moved to Luton. And if his manager's telling him, look, I want you in the squad, but if you're in League One, I can't justify it. He's going to move. He is going to move. I also think that his performances for Luton in the back end of that season have probably earned him a decent championship move. So, hopefully, we're talking. I imagine Luton won't want to make a loss on him. So, upwards of £3.5 million, and a percentage of it coming to Latics would be lovely. Lovely bit of money to reinvest in the squad. That brings us to the end of today's episode, the end of last week's news. In the coming weeks, again, as I said, I'll bring you the news at the start of every show of what's going on, where we're at, any contracts. I would imagine a certain Callum McManaman would be next on the agenda. Any recruitment, of course, any transfer rumours I will bring you. But over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to start to roll out my sensible transfers list. That is because, for some reason, everyone this year, from the Premier League to the National League, has decided, no, we're not doing what we've done in previous years where the transfer window goes a bit slow and no one really makes it. Everyone's gone into hyperdrive. Is that even a word? I don't know. Everyone has put themselves in 5th gear, 6th gear. We're going to 7th. Everyone's decided we're moving and we're moving early, basically. So I'm going to start rolling out my sensible transfers list before 70% of them have been wiped out by other teams. Next week, I will bring you the news. As always, I will also bring you 5 players Wigan Athletic should sign in the summer transfer window. I've been Corey Bissell. This has been the Latics Lowdown. We will be back live Wednesday next week, and I'll see you there.